Welcome to Economics in 5 Minutes, where we cover in 5 minutes what you might see in a typical chapter of an economics book. Today, episode 1, we're going to be focusing on production possibilities and gains from trade. This is a production possibilities frontier. PPFs are graphed on two axes of goods, and the line represents the maximum bundles of cars and computers that society can produce. Thus, below the line is feasible and inefficient. Society can produce at these bundles, but it's inefficient for society to do so because the resources are not being used to the fullest extent possible. Up here on the line is feasible and efficient, and this is where society wants to produce because society's resources are being used to their fullest extent. And up here is simply not feasible. Society can't produce there as much as it might want to because society has scarcity. Now, the opportunity cost of something is what you have to give up in order to get that thing. Thus, if you want to take a theater class and a psychology class, but they take place at the same time, if you end up taking the theater class, then the psychology class is the opportunity cost of your decision. In a similar manner, if in the previous example you had to give up two computers in order to produce one car, then the two computers would be your opportunity cost of the production of that one car. This can be expressed as a ratio, 2 computers per car or 0.5 cars per computer. And as it turns out, this is the slope of the production possibilities frontier. To illustrate, let's say we go from a bundle along the PPF here, A, 3 cars and 3 computers, to a point B, 5 computers and 2 cars. In the process, we give up 1 car in order to get 2 computers. This is 1 over 2, rise over run, ends up being 0.5 cars per computer, which is the same as we saw in the previous slide. Now let's take a hypothetical example. Let's say that the United States and China are the only 2 countries in the world, and that they only produce 2 goods, cars and computers. These are obviously false assumptions, but we'll just take them for the sake of learning economics. Let's furthermore assume that these numbers are the maximum productions of these 2 countries of these 2 goods. So, if the United States focuses all of its energies on the production of cars, then it can produce at most 20 cars. And similarly, if it focuses all of its energies on computers, it can produce at most 80 computers. But it can trade production of cars for production of computers and vice versa. So if it doesn't produce all of its 20 cars here, it can focus some of its energies on producing computers, and it can produce some computers. And it's the same way for China. And so the production possibility frontiers of the 2 countries look like this. Now, a country has the absolute advantage in the production of a good if it can produce the most of that good. So in this example, China has the absolute advantage in the production of cars, since it can produce more cars than the US, and it has the absolute advantage in computers, since it can produce more computers than the US, pretty obviously. But more importantly, a country has the comparative advantage in the production of good if it can produce that good at a lower opportunity cost than the other country. So to figure this one out, we're going to need to calculate some opportunity costs. For the US, it's obviously 4 computers per car here, 80 computers divided by 20 cars, and for China, it is 2.5 computers per car, just the 100 divided by 40. Now, China has the comparative advantage in the production of cars since it has to give up only 2.5 computers for the production of 1 car, whereas the United States has to give up 4 computers to produce 1 car. And the United States has the comparative advantage in the production of computers here. Now, let's say just for a second that the United States and China decide to produce only what they have a comparative advantage in. That is, the United States produces 80 computers and 0 cars, and China produces 40 cars and 0 computers. Let's furthermore assume that they decide to start trading rather than just producing along the PPFs, and let's say they trade at a rate that is between the 2 opportunity costs, let's say 3 computers per car. And let's say that the United States decides to trade 60 computers in exchange for 20 cars. This is what happens. As you can see, the bundles after trade for both the United States and China are above their PPFs. Thus, in this example, trade is mutually beneficial for the 2 countries. And in fact, if 2 countries for any 2 particular goods trade at a rate that is between their 2 opportunity costs, and they produce exclusively what they have a comparative advantage in, then both countries will be overall better off. This is even true when one country has the absolute advantage in both goods, as China does here. The only time when trade does not benefit both countries is when they have the same opportunity cost, in which case there is no incentive to trade. Now, politicians, many times, go out there and say that trade is actually a bad thing because it ships jobs overseas or for a plethora of other reasons. While it is true that trade has a lot of negative consequences, this gives a simplistic illustration as to why the vast majority of economists believe that trade is, overall, a very good thing.